One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. I've said this before and I'll say it again and again. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence. Level of education, profession, and uniforms do not offer protection. Today, Mia courageously joins me to share her experience as a law enforcement officer who survived domestic violence and intimate partner trafficking. Here's Mia. Hi, Mia. This has been a while in planning, but I'm glad that you have finally made it, and welcome to One in Three.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to schedule it and get it together.
Yes, and just a little background on the two of us. We met doing the domestic violence rally back in October. Do you know Cynthia? Is that how, or was it?
I actually know Jennifer Garcia.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah. I was going to say, I think it was Jennifer. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so if listeners, if you haven't checked that out, I think it's still available, right? On Facebook somewhere or something?
You know what? I actually don't know, but I did post a little clip on my stuff too. But I don't know if it's still available. I tried to look at the website and I couldn't find it. So
okay, I'll try to find it and see if we can get that back up in case anyone wants to take a look at it. It was long.
And I was the very last.
Oh my gosh, you hung in there so well, though.
It was for like 4 hours. I was the very last person.
It was crazy. But it's so much good information.
Mm-hmm. It was. Okay. It was really important too. So I was good with it. It was really interesting listening to everybody.
Yes, I agree. And yeah, so many good topics: men, parental alienation, women, trafficking, all sorts of things. So, okay, so that was our little connection. But could you just give a little personal background, professional background, whatever, just a little bit of information on yourself so listeners can get to know you a bit?
Yeah. So I've been in law enforcement for a really long time. I started in 2008, and I'd like to say that I have 17 years, which is crazy to say. I took a little bit of a break though, so I don't technically have 17 years, but it feels like 25. And I have worked in patrol, and I actually did some undercover operations and things like that too. And now I'm an investigator, a detective. So that's fun. And I also investigate like sex crimes, domestic violence, trafficking, all the things. It's busy and hard and a lot, but I love it because people are my jam. I love human behavior, and I love, helping people. And I feel like I can really make a difference in somebody's life, like in real time, which is probably what kept me in law enforcement. But the crazy part about me is that I have lived experience with being in a domestic violence, intimate partner trafficking relationship, which while I was a cop. So usually that doesn't happen. And I was very, very young. I was a brand new cop. He was older, lots older than me, and he was a senior cop. So we had that kind of dynamic. But it's an interesting perspective because I have the perspective of being a survivor and law enforcement. So I understand what both sides are going through.
Yeah, and you understand what it is like as a victim survivor trying to navigate the whole legal system with and the challenges that you can face even as a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because I think for a big chunk of my career, I always did my best. I always cared about people, and I was always very compassionate to people. But I think so it wasn't for a really long time that I actually realize that I was a victim, which is interesting. And we can talk about that too. But I think that once I tried to call on the system the way I had been working in it, so I tried to report it. Yeah, I mean, the way I was treated was insane. So not in a good way, which was really, really crazy. And so I think it really helped me as a cop, because I was like, wait a minute, like we cannot be treating people like this. This is something that affects somebody's entire life, their family, their future, just the way they move in life, the way they have relationships. And sometimes law enforcement is somebody's first contact when somebody realizes that they've been a victim, or right after an incident happens, and then we're treating them like they're liars, like we don't believe them, that, oh, this couldn't have happened this way or whatever. And it just compounds the trauma. So,
Yeah.
so a big part of what I'm trying to do now, I'm still in law enforcement, and everything that I'm doing now is just me. It has nothing to do with my agency or anything like that. It's just me, but I'm teaching also. I'm training and teaching and speaking, doing consulting and things like that too. I started the Valkyrie Warrior movement, and I decided to start that because Valkyrie warriors were female warriors that they actually chose who was held in a really positive regard. I don't know if it was a heaven or hell situation, but they chose the warriors that they were going to take with them. And what I felt about it was that we can choose to be warriors for ourselves, and that we can fight for ourselves, and we are warriors. I mean, survivors are, it's a crazy thing to go through. And so I started that, and I am doing mostly training with law enforcement, because I really do believe in changing the narrative on how law enforcement sees victims and survivors, especially in trafficking, but also in domestic violence. I mean, we have come a long way in domestic violence, but we have a long way to go still. Trafficking, I think we have a long way to go. I think we're starting to talk about it, but there's a lot of people that tell me in law enforcement they don't really understand it that well. And so I'm really trying to change the narrative, because back in the old days when I first started, it was looked at as, well, it was prostitution, and prostitution was a crime and all of these things. And, what we've come to find out is really someone is forcing someone to do these things. And so it changes the perspective on trafficking. And so I'm really trying to help change that narrative within law enforcement, and also, just the system, DA's offices, the medical field, even community organizations. There's community organizations out there that they're really helping people, and they're really trying to help people, but they really do need a good grasp of understanding what survivors are going through, but also the side of law enforcement, that what they need to help us and what we need to help them. So it's kind of like bridging that gap.
Yeah, it's a whole network that needs to work together that doesn't always necessarily work together, and there's no communication back and forth. I'm a nurse practitioner, so I know the healthcare portion of it, and it's very difficult to not already have some sort of a stereotype in your mind when somebody comes in to the hospital, your clinic, or wherever, and without any actual interaction with domestic violence or trafficking, you will put those stereotypes out there. You're trying not to. Everyone's supposed to be treated equally, but you don't understand it. And it's really hard to grasp.
I mean, I think it's a no fault to your own or anybody. Law enforcement does the same thing. And I think it's no fault to anybody. I think it's sensationalized on TV. I think we have a specific idea of who people are and what people have gone through to get to that point, or something like that, when really, I mean, I kind of break all those stereotypes. I didn't come from a deep poverty background. I didn't come from, a background where I was being molested as a child by family members and things like that. I didn't come from a background where I was running away and my parents weren't doing drugs. And, I didn't come from that stereotypical, what people think that's, how somebody ends up in trafficking. I came from a regular middle class family and I became a cop, so that's not the stereotype either. And I think that it's very easy to be involved in these kinds of relationships because, I mean, I'm a parent and I think that just trying to raise your kids, it's difficult because we try not to screw them up, right? But things happen in growing up that your parents might not even have tried to do that may have made you feel like you were craving love or acceptance, or you wanted to prove yourself to someone more than your parents probably intended you to feel. And sometimes those vulnerabilities and those weaknesses can translate into an adult world and cause you to seek that out in people. And I personally think that there's just predators out there. And I think that they pick up on it so easily.
Yeah, I also think, and along those lines, is they will pick up on individuals who want to make things work. That,
Oh,
for
yeah.
instance, like family is really, really important to them. So they know that
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 was
person's
me.
not just going to give up.
Mhm. Yeah.
They're going to say, I need to keep trying. We need to make
Yeah.
this work.
Yeah, that was me. And I also had very good family morals and values where you don't, I didn't grow up being taught you should be flaky in relationships. If somebody doesn't do something that it does something that you don't like not picking up their clothes or they're not, whatever, you need to work it out. That was a big thing, was work it out, figure out how to work it out. Well, I do believe in that, but I also believe that if you're being hurt in the process, we don't need to be working it out. And I learned that the hard way, but that was the way I was brought up. And I also think that predators look for people who are strong and they look for people who are charismatic and they have a lot of friends and they're lights to be around. They have this internal light that these predator people don't have. And so they go, hey, I want some of that. And and I think it's also a challenge to crush those people down. And I
Yeah.
think that they feel some sort of, I feel better about myself now that I was able to crush that person down. Look at me, see how much better I am than they are.
Yes. Yeah. They want, initially, they want the person who's going to make them look good.
Mm-hmm.
But then if that person starts looking too good, then it's a competition. I actually would say this to my abuser. I'm like, what are you doing? We're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be a team. You're acting like this is a competition. And he would say, this is a competition. I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
would just blatantly say it. It is a competition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's disgusting
Yeah.
behavior, but I think that considering the two of us, you in law enforcement, me in the medical profession, to become victims of, well, you domestic violence and trafficking, but me domestic violence, it just goes to show that there's nobody that is exempt from
Mm-hmm.
potentially being a victim.
Yeah. And it's it's still, for me, is still sometimes difficult. Even hearing like being a victim of trafficking is really challenging for me because for a really long time I didn't see it that way. And I blamed myself for a really long time. And I didn't even realize that what was happening to me. And also there's a deep shame around those things, especially being in law enforcement. I should have known better. I'm smarter than that. You're a cop. How do you go out and arrest these people? How could you be a victim in it? There's a lot of that. So that's also a message that I love to put out there, is that we just cannot beat ourselves up, and the public needs to not beat us up because we're beating ourselves up enough. Um, and also, like, I was a victim in something, but I'm not a victim. I'm not a victim. I'm a survivor of it. Um, And in law enforcement, we talk, and I know, if you work with victims in the medical field, we talk in victim, suspect, offender, witness, reporting party, all of those terms. But, I don't feel like I feel like I was victimized, but I don't feel like I'm a victim in this, which means to me, I want people to feel sorry for me. I want my life to be treated differently because something like that happened to me. Um, no, I survived it. Which is more, which I think is better than what they ever intended for me. Because I think that the purpose was to keep me down and to keep me torn down. And I feel like resilience is the best revenge. Um, but it's still challenging. Talking about being a victim of trafficking is crazy to me, and I think part of that stigma needs to go away if we really are going to listen to people that have gone through things like this, because automatically people go, oh, how did you end up in that kind of dirty situation? Well, that's not always how it happens. And we shouldn't be shaming victims and survivors because they're shaming themselves enough. We don't need to do it for them. And also, like, it's the same thing as shaming domestic violence victims. I mean, you trusted someone, you loved someone, you wanted to make it work, you were loyal to them, you cared about them and really deeply felt something for somebody. Like, all of those things are really good things. All of those
Right.
things are positive. They're not some dirty bad thing that you did. I mean, these are all things that I think should be held in a high regard in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And when someone has that stigma of, oh, how did you end up like that? It's like, maybe you should be picking better men. Like, I hear that a lot. Maybe you should be
Yeah.
picking better
Yeah.
men. What I feel really should be said is maybe those men shouldn't have treated you that way. Maybe they shouldn't have hurt you and abused you and took advantage of you because you have really great values and someone shouldn't have exploited that.
Yeah, I think it's for society, I think it's so much easier to blame the victim because if you're going to blame the perpetrator or the abuser, then you have to come to terms with understanding that there are people out there that are so inherently evil that they're going to pose as this person who can be trusted and loved by this other individual and then just flip around and hurt them worse than their enemy would. And I think it is just easier to blame the victim. You're right. We shouldn't be blamed at all. But I mean, unfortunately, that is the case.
It's really interesting though. That's a really interesting talking point because I in my world in law enforcement, we know there are those people. We come across people like that every day who take advantage of people, who exploit people, who, some people I believe are just evil people. They just do evil things to people. So we know. And I mean, the whole you should just pick better men, I've heard from men in my field who know that there's people out there that treat people like that. So it's wild. I mean, I agree with you. I agree that society does that usually. And it's kind of like the boogie monster that you don't want to acknowledge. But it's really interesting though, because in my field, like, really, they should know better.
You're absolutely right. I guess I never really thought of it from a law enforcement perspective because I think as somebody not in law enforcement, you want to make an excuse of somebody's behavior. So if somebody robs a bank, well, they had really hard times, the
Mhm.
economy's bad, they had a family to feed, or they somehow got hooked on whatever kind of drugs, and that's they're at their wits end trying to feed this habit, and you want to make an excuse for the bad things that happen
Mhm.
as a non-law enforcement
Yeah.
person. And
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. From your perspective and your colleagues, it's something that they should understand more.
Yeah. I think too, the longer that someone does my job, I think that you can get wrapped up into the, people need to take responsibility for their own actions, right? Um, and I get that to some degree, but I just don't think it's that simple. I think that because trafficking, domestic violence, sex assault, they're very intertwined. It's all has to do with coercive control, right? I mean, it's not that much different from each other, and a lot of times domestic violence, sex assaults play into trafficking, trafficking plays into domestic violence, trafficking can play into I mean, it's all kind of intertwined. So I just feel like it's really interesting when I think that people want people to take responsibility for themselves. Um, but I think just in some circumstances, there's things that happen that the script gets flipped onto someone where it's like, well, you are the problem. And so I think a victim really is trying, a lot of times, I know I did this. I did try to take responsibility for myself in those relationships because if I was the problem, then I needed to prove myself to make it better. And that was my downfall because that's how I got stuck in those relationships. I constantly tried to prove that I wasn't the person that they were telling me that I was. And have you watched the documentary on P. Diddy?
No.
So it's really interesting, and I think that that's a really good documentary. It it's interesting from the point of trafficking and domestic violence, and sex assault, and the point of view that society has on all of those things.
Oh,
Because
what is that on? Or where can you find it?
gosh, I think it's on Netflix. The new one, it's The
Okay.
Reckoning.
Okay.
I watched both, but I think that one's a really good one. Um, it it's really interesting because he didn't get convicted of trafficking, and you watch this and you're like, how is this not trafficking?
Mm-hmm.
And even the jurors talk on there about, well, if it was that bad, she could have just left. She
Oh,
chose it to some
yeah.
degree, right? And I think that that is a point that we have to start having conversations around, is that society and professionals and all the people want people to take responsibility for their own actions. Like, she stayed. She said she wanted it at some point. And it's really interesting. I was watching it and I was like, well, her saying she wanted these things, wasn't that just like her surviving?
Yes.
You
Yes.
know?
You get to the point where, and again, it's coercion, right? So
Yes.
you keep
She was
saying
being
no.
hit. She
Yes.
was being beat up.
Exactly. You say no, you get hit. No, hit, no, hit. Eventually you want to stop getting hit and you learn to condition yourself. If I say yes, this stops.
And if I believe that this is actually what I actually want, or if I
Yes.
if I try to convince myself that this is, I guess I'm just this person now, you know, um, I think that it plays into that. I'm going to prove to you these things. I think it plays into the I have to survive. Like, I don't want to continue to get hit or strangled or whatever else. But it was a really interesting documentary because it shows a lot about what society's view is, and I think it stirs questions within yourself of like, how do I really feel about all of this? Can you consent if you're being hit all the time? Can you, if no one was really, so my question was always, well, if nobody is paying him, right? Because that's what we think about trafficking, right? It's straight up just exchange for money for commercial sex, okay? And I've done a lot of research into this because I don't think that that's always how it works, right? It can be anything of value. Can his satisfaction of dominance and watching someone sexually assault her be a thing of value? Doesn't say monetary value, but him having the control of providing her to people for status, for people continuing to come to him for things, for his own fantasy, pleasure, whatever. That dominance over that complete control dominance over that person, can't that be a thing of value?
Yeah. I mean, it can be, right? You look at any other crime and you can see where their instant gratification is
Mm-hmm.
the prize, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that in law enforcement, I think that we need to have conversations with our district attorneys, and we need to really look into the law and see, what, especially in the courts, right? We need to see what the court deems a thing of value, because I don't know if some judges or DAs will see, the control and domination, a thing of value, but I sure think it is. Especially when especially if that's what your life is. That was what my life was. He was very violent to me. And he pretty much, I said to him before, you're just like the people that I arrest, and I'm just like the people that we are out there trying to help, and this is what you're doing. And he was like, yeah, you either deal with it or shut up. Or say something about it. But it was always, if you say something about it, then I'm going to take you down with me. I'm also going to get you fired, because if you're involved in anything like this, then, and it wasn't even the trafficking thing. It was domestic violence. I was a baby cop. I know better now, but I didn't know then. I thought if you were involved in domestic violence in any aspect, whether you were a victim or around it, any of it, that you were going to lose your job. And to me, I had moved across the country. I had left my family. I was alone. It was my career. It was like the rest of my life career. I had worked so hard in the academy. I had busted my butt in the academy and got through it, and, was really proud of myself. And then here he was saying, if you report me, then I'm taking you down with me. And I was terrified, and that's part of the coercion and control. And then it was, if I didn't want to sleep with someone else, and he would groom the people around us too, because he would make people believe that we were living a certain lifestyle. And I didn't want to live that lifestyle. And we fought about it all the time. And anytime I told him I didn't want to, he would hit me and hurt me. And anytime that we would get in a fight, he would strangle me. And I didn't even know then that, because we didn't talk in law enforcement, we didn't talk about strangulation then the way we do now. But I could have died. I was close to death at times. Like I didn't even realize it. And so when we fought about me not wanting to sleep with other people or be with other people, he would do those things. And then could I really consent? Like, could I really consent in that situation? And what was interesting is when I tried to report it to law enforcement, they were like, yeah, but the domestic violence, the assaults, even the sex assaults, they're past the statute of limitations. And I was like, yeah, they are. You're right. But that goes into the other stuff. Like, you have to take that into we love the words totality of the circumstances in law enforcement. You have to take that into the totality of the situation and go like, that is what's playing into this other stuff. How can you consent when you're being beat up and strangled and almost killed all the time? How can you consent to sleeping with other people for his gratification, or, sex at all, or a relationship with this person if you're being beat up all the time? I mean, you can't, that's not consensual anymore. And then the life he wanted to live was, I'm going to dominate you. You're going to be submissive to me. And so, like, to me, even that type of, and listen, BDSM, people live that life. I have no judgments, but that's all consensual, right? Swinging, BDSM, all of those, they're all, when people do those things because they want to, it's because they want to. It's consensual. You shouldn't have to get blacked out drunk every time you do something like that. You shouldn't have to feel scared or be worried if you're going to die if you say no. I mean, that's not consensual anymore. So that type of lifestyle, can that be consensual if someone's beating you up all the time if you say no? I mean, and those are the types of things that, like, as professionals, we need to look at, because I think the thought process around it is like, people can be swingers. People can live
Right.
BDSM lifestyles. Like, that's not illegal, and it's not. And if people want to do that, great. But not when there's force, fraud, or coercion in there. That's what makes it a crime.
Yeah. So is that the lifestyle that he was trying to tell the other people who got
Oh, yeah.
involved that they were okay?
Yeah. And that so at some point, I was like, I guess this is just what it is. Like, it's funny. When I first became a cop, I thought I was not naive. I was 21
Right.
years old. I was like, I know, I'm a grown up, but now I'm like, I was pretty naive. I didn't even know what swinging was. I didn't even know what that was.
Right.
I didn't live in a big city. I was from a small town. I was like, I didn't even know what that was. So he tried to make it this thing. And he groomed everybody around us to think that this was what it was. And it wasn't. It was a crime.
Did anyone you encountered during that time frame, did anyone ever did they ever notice that you were not happy or there was something wrong? Did anyone try to intervene to help?
No, but I people at work noticed. So when I first would go to work, I was like that baby rookie cop who was so excited to be at work. So smiley. I'd go to work at like an hour early to get my car ready and like get everything ready for work. And I loved going to work. And people would even say to me, like, why are you smiling so much? And I'm just, I loved it. I'm so excited to be here. And then probably a couple years into it, people would just be like, you just look so tired. You just look so tired. And you're just like not smiley anymore. And no one ever like talked to me about it. And I think I go back and forth, because a lot of times I'm like, well, maybe if somebody would have said something or intervened or whatever, but I don't even know if I was so like loyal that I don't even know if I would have even taken the help. I think that it would have taken him getting arrested, or me getting killed, or me probably going to the hospital, to like, I knew it was wrong though. Like, I knew it was. I think I was just so, at some point I was so far in that I was like, I guess this is just what it is now. Like, I don't even care anymore. Which is a really sad place for people to be, especially like knowing me now. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, I don't even know how I could have turned into that person. Um, but it's slow, and you know how it is. It's not like, hey, we go on our first date and I'm just going to slap you in the face. Like everybody would be like, peace out, you crazy psycho. I'm going to go call the cops now.
That's right.
And people are always like, well, why didn't you just leave? And why didn't you just call the cops? And by the way, cops were called. But why didn't you just leave? And why didn't you just call the cops? And it's like, yeah, because at that point I just was like, this was my fault.
Right.
you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, your reality is twisted and twisted and twisted and turned upside down so many times that you don't know who is to blame anymore for
Mhm.
anything that's happening.
Yeah, and he took advantage of me being young, me being in a new place, me being naive, me coming from a small town. I mean, I would get told constantly that you're not how men want women to be. You're not a real woman if you don't do certain things. You're not a real woman if you don't look a certain way or dress a certain way. Um, and if you don't do it, I'll just go find somebody who will. And for me, that was like, I should have just, now I would like, then please go find someone else,
Right. Right.
um, because that's like everybody's thought in their head when I say something like that is like, why didn't you just say like, yeah, go find somebody else? And that should have been my reaction. But I was young and I was like, I really like this person. And he spent a lot of time in the beginning, like telling me how much he cared about me and um, how great I was and how he was going to help me as a cop and how he was, you know, he was such a great guy and he was so charismatic and everybody really liked him. And I was just enthralled as a young woman and also as a young cop. And there was a lot of things that were intertwined into it. And I think that in law enforcement, that happens a lot. It happens a
Yeah.
lot. It happens a lot where there's older cops, higher ranking cops, where they, these new rookie women come in and it's almost not every one of them, but there's almost this weird predatory thing that goes on. And these young women are like, look at this established, well liked, great, everybody likes this person guy that like I want to have a great reputation and I want to be connected to this person because I want to be looked at like they are and all of those. There's so much stuff that goes into it. So
So how did you get out?
um I physically removed myself and moved back across the country.
Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
left my
terrifying.
career. Yeah. It was really hard, and I would love to say that one violent incident was the last straw, but I think that it was more emotional for me. It was the realization that this person that I was trying so hard to make love me didn't really love me, because that's not what you do when so you love someone. That I didn't really like who he was, that if we weren't married, that I wouldn't have been even friends with him. Um, that he was never going to treat me like his family. And I think it was more of an emotional realization. And I wasn't even I wasn't even myself anymore. I was exhausted. I was constantly exhausted. I was not doing, I mean, I didn't get in trouble in my job, or I think I was still a good cop, but I wasn't doing the things that I wanted to do. I wasn't on the, trajectory that I was in the beginning. And I think that there were moments that, I didn't want to go to family gatherings anymore. I didn't want to go out in public anymore because I had to explain why my eyes were always puffy from crying. And I had to explain why, like, I just looked so tired all the time. And I was just like tired of it. And so I didn't want to like go do things anymore. And I think that there was times where I was just home, sometimes alone. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I think it was more emotional, but I did have to, and it was getting more violent, but I did have to actually physically remove myself. And when I did physically remove myself, it took a very, very long time for me. I mean, I had to text him every hour. Um, Otherwise I must have been like cheating on him, or I must have been like doing something wrong in our relationship. That was how he twisted. And I was like, well, I don't cheat, and I'm not that person. So yeah, I'll 100% text you. Like, I have nothing to hide. I'm not doing anything wrong. And that's how that manipulation went into it. But when I left, I would still text him every hour, and every hour it was like crazy. It was like this weird clockwork within my body. And like, I would still go to text him. And it took me a really long time. And that goes into the conversation about, well, I don't understand. Like, after he sexually assaulted her, she went out to lunch with him. It's like, yeah, like trying to make it normal, number
Right.
one. And
Right.
also, like, if it had been happening for a really long time, it, I've gone to therapy for a long time, and I had to talk to a counselor about this and go like, I will like look at my phone. Like, it's this weird, like, body reaction. And she was like, it's like being addicted to a drug. Um, and I've never done drugs, so I have no idea, but I imagine that's what it feels like. And it was like, I it was very strange. It was like I had to look at my phone. I had to like go to text him, but I was like, why am I texting? I'm not in a relationship with him anymore. I'm not even like in the same state anymore. Like, it was very odd. But it took a really long time for me to like deprogram some of that stuff. And then it also took me a very long time to deprogram that lifestyle, that person that was involved, that's not who I actually am. That wasn't who I was before that. Um, and to like figure out actually who I was again. It took like probably over 10 years.
Well, especially because you were so young when it
Mhm.
started happening too. So you were right at the time where you're actually figuring out who you are as an adult.
Mhm.
And then he swooped in and created this other identity for
Mhm.
you. So it's hard to do all of that. That's a lot of work that you have to put
Yeah.
in.
And I know, because, and I'm sure that you get this too. The biggest the biggest argument from people who have never been in a situation like this is like, well, why didn't you just leave? Or I could never imagine
Yes.
myself in a relationship like that, or a situation like that, or you're so dumb, or you make bad decisions, you make bad choices. Inherently, that's who you are. So in my training, this is one of the analogies that I love to give people, because I I've heard it a lot from women, but I've also heard it a lot from men. And I think probably just because I work with men mostly. But I always tell them, so imagine that you're in this relationship. You're in this brand new relationship, and you really, really like this girl. And she gives you attention, and she likes you back, but you just really want to impress her. And you're the guy who, like, you love your t-shirts and ball caps. Like, you're that guy, right? Like, you just are like, this is what I'm comfortable in. This is what I feel like I look sexy in. This is what I feel like I, have confidence in. This is just like, I'm that guy. And you meet this girl, and you really like her, and you want to impress her, and she likes you, and she's really popular, and you're just like, man, I want to be in this person's life. And she says to you, well, I really don't like those t-shirts and ball caps. And actually, like, would you just try like this button-up shirt for me? Would you just try it on? I think it would look really good on you. And you're like, yeah, like, I'll try it on. Sure, whatever. Compromise, right? Compromise in relationships, right? Put it on, and she's like, oh my gosh, you just look so good. You're so sexy. You look like you have way more, like you look put together. Like that's the person that I want to take out and go and show to the world. Like, I really love you wearing these button up shirts. And you're like, oh man, I feel really good in this button up shirt now. And then time goes by and months go by and you go to your closet and you just don't have any t-shirts and ball caps anymore. Like, how does that even happen? But you're never the person who could get involved in a relationship like that. And I
That's
know
right.
it's a totally different, like it's a very different extreme. I get that. But the point is that when people say like, how could you ever, I would never abandon who I am. How would you ever end up in a relationship where you just are like, where you go against everything that you ever believe in? You must believe in those things. That's the rationalization for it, right? It's like, I say I'm not that kind of person. And they're like, well, you obviously are, because look, you're in this relationship and this is how they treat you and you're okay with it. But it doesn't happen like that. It's little by little. It's one button up shirt at a time.
Yeah. And then they make you feel good. That's a great analogy because they make you feel good about the
Yeah. And you're like,
changes.
oh yeah. And I want to impress you. And
Yeah.
I love the smile on your face. I love how
Mm-hmm.
your energy changes when I put this button up shirt on. Like, and every time I wear a ball cap and a cap and a t-shirt, you kind of look at me like, I have to go out in public with that guy,
Right.
you know? And
Right.
then you're like, oh, maybe these ball caps and t-shirts don't really look that great on me. And maybe like, I don't know, maybe I thought they did, but like maybe I kind of look like a slob in them, or I don't look that great in
Mm-hmm.
them. Okay, well, maybe I don't know. What do other people think? What do her friends think? I want her friends to like me. I want her
Right.
family to like me. Like, and you start to question your own self and your own choices and your own beliefs and your own values. And
That's right.
yes, it's a different extreme, but it's the same type of thing. It's the same manipulation.
Right. It's all that sneaky behavior. They can isolate you the same way. It's not just, oh, hey, I don't want you talking to anybody else except for me. It's not that blatant. It will be
No.
something like, oh, really? You're going to go hang out with your friends? I really was thinking we could just have a romantic
You know
night
what?
together.
I don't really like her that much
Uh
because
huh.
like, she just is like, she talks bad about people and like, she's just kind of whiny and just is like negative all the time. And, there's, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
she does
Yeah.
have a lot of problems in relationships and comes to me a lot about it. And maybe she is kind of negative, and it just starts to get that like
Mm-hmm. And she just brings you
questions.
down. You're such a
Yeah.
great person. And
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and that ball cap t-shirt analogy is something that people can understand because I think people have done that a lot in relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so people like I in my training, I always am like, who could ever imagine themselves in a relationship like this? And no one raises their hand. No one.
Right.
And then I'd give the analogy and I'm like, who's ever done that? And most everyone raises their
Of
hand.
course.
And I'm like, you could end up in a relationship like that because everybody has things about themselves they don't like. Everybody has vulnerabilities. Everybody has some sort of thing in their life that might have caused them to feel bad about themselves, or people have trauma. And unfortunately, predators, what they do is that they hone in and they learn those things. And that's what they use against people. And there's some people who are very susceptible to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I was one of those people because I went through things as a kid and I went through things as a teenager, and I had thoughts about myself of I thought I was a really, really, really great person on the inside, and I really care about people and all of those things. But there was people around me who made me feel like I was a problem. So I feel like I constantly felt like I needed to prove myself to people. And I think a predator, they don't, like I said, they don't go up and slap you on the first date. They probe, right? They're probers, and they go in and they probe and they see where they can poke holes and they see if it works. And then if it does, they push a little harder and they go, this is the one. I'm going to do it with this one,
Yep.
and I think people can be very susceptible to that. I just think that maybe they haven't found the predator hasn't found the right probe or the right hole to poke in. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So you have just like the perfect storm to do something as a survivor and then also as a law enforcement professional.
Mm-hmm.
So, can we talk a little bit more about the Valkyrie warrior movement and what
Mm-hmm.
that all entails?
Yeah. So it's funny, every day I feel like my brain goes crazy and I have ideas and thoughts and,
Yeah.
goals but my biggest passion is to train and change the way we look at survivors and the way we look at traffickers and abusers and predators, and changing that shift of who we're blaming, who we need to be, because if we don't change the psychology in our own heads, then we go into a situation with that preconceived notion, right? We
Yeah.
already go in going, is she lying about this? Because
Mm-hmm.
maybe she just, and it's hard. Law enforcement's hard because people do lie to us. Victims lie to us. Witnesses lie to us. Suspects lie to us. Everybody's lying to us. Not everybody, but everybody lies to us, right? So then we have to like sift through all that, and it's hard because I don't know. I don't live in their life. I don't walk through it with them day to day. But we've got to be better, and we've got to be good at human behavior. So that's kind of where I do my goals and my training, is to help people be better in that human behavior for survivors, especially with trafficking and domestic violence and sex assaults. But also that training, that understanding the psychology of it. And I'm not a psychologist, so just take that with a grain of salt. But I have a lot of experience in both survivor and law enforcement.
Right.
I think all the professions, medical, first responders, even fire, even sometimes I think even dispatch, because they have to talk to these people on the phone and really try to like sift through what's going on. So first responders, community organizations, that gap between law enforcement and the community organizations, changing and really working on the narrative and the way we're looking at these crimes. So that's a big, huge thing for me. And the reason I want this so bad is because I never, ever, ever want someone to treat a victim the way I was treated.
Yeah.
I was treated like I was a liar. I was treated like I was a revengeful spouse that wanted to get back at their ex-husband for who knows what after almost 10 years. I don't know. People should not be treated that way. I mean, I like pretty much like laid it out on a silver platter and gave it to them, and because I knew the law and I
Right.
knew how to do an investigation, and I gave it to them on a silver platter, and they pretty much just acted like I was lying, or I don't know.
Do you think that's because of who your ex-husband was, or do you think
I
that's
don't know.
common?
I think I also just think it's like not putting together all the pieces. Like I just don't think that person that I reported it to, I don't think that they put together the connections of the forced fraud of coercion, of the domestic violence and the sex assaults and the trafficking. They saw it as separate. They wanted to look at it as a crime, as a separate thing. But we like, and there's tons of trainings out there, especially in domestic violence, that talk about like the coercion and control. And even though like coercion and control might not fit yet into a specific crime, it plays into the totality of the crime. You have to gather that information too, to show what's going on in the big picture. And so what I've kind of noticed or experienced is sometimes cops go, yeah, that's not a crime. I don't really care about that. You know, like we talk about civil matters all the time, and like people controlling bank accounts and stuff. And you're like, yeah, that's a civil matter. That's something you're gonna have to figure out in court, and it's like, yes, but that also plays into the coercion and control. And in trafficking, it plays into the force, fraud, or coercion. So you do have to document that stuff. You do have to take that stuff in consideration. And it does play a huge role into the actual crime. Um, so I don't really know, honestly. I think that it's a couple things. I think it's preconceived thoughts about who people are or what people are doing. This mentality of like, I don't have DNA, so I can't prove it or something. I think that, you know, the weirdest thing that was said to me was, we have a higher burden of proof in these cases. We have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And I was like, no, actually, you're a cop and your burden of proof is probable cause. So I don't know what you're talking about. And
Mm-hmm.
as an investigator, like, I get what they're saying. You do want to build a good case, but my job is not to argue in court proof beyond a reasonable doubt. My job as law enforcement is probable cause, and probable cause is more likely than not a reasonable person would believe that a crime had occurred. I mean, it's a higher standard than like preponderance of the evidence, which is pretty low, like in civil cases, but it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard. Probable cause is not that high, that highest standard. Um, so that was upsetting to me because I was like, I know what your burden of proof is, and he refused to send it to the DA's office to even have them look over it. I begged him to,
Oh my
I begged
gosh.
him to, and he wouldn't do it. Um, and he argued that the statute of limitations was passed and all these things, which technically trafficking there is no statute of limitations. So there's just like a lot of things that went into it that was really bad. And so like for me to do trainings and things like that, it's a huge motivating factor is that I never want people to be treated like that.
Do you do the trainings yourself? Do you have a team? How does that
Um,
work?
I do the trainings myself, but I do have another officer that she has also been through some things in her life, but so she is very knowledgeable, but she's also very knowledgeable in law enforcement. And she is going to start helping me do some like almost like threat assessment type things that we can look into. Like when we look into the crimes, we can kind of take certain factors and do. She's like has expertise in threat assessments, and lethality
Mm-hmm.
um, assessments are
Mm-hmm.
really really important with domestic violence, with trafficking. I mean, all of it. It's really important. So she's going to start helping me do those things. But I do virtual trainings and I do in-person trainings. And
Okay.
yeah, and I also am going to be doing some consulting. So I will help like community organizations to bridging the gaps between law enforcement and their organizations because it is frustrating and I get it. Um, but also like what their policies and programs for survivors and things like that too. And then I have spoken at conferences and so those types of things and I am really researching and trying to figure out a step further to write a book. And I really would really love to write a book integrating my story with the practical application for law enforcement.
That I think would be incredible. How receptive has everyone been with the education?
It's really interesting because sometimes I think that what I'm talking about is like common knowledge. I don't know.
All
I like
right.
some of the, I probably because I've just done law enforcement for so long, but
Uh-huh.
also I'm just like, yeah, like isn't this just like I don't think it's sometimes when I talk about it with people, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure you already know this, but I'm gonna just talk about it anyway because this is what I'm talking about, and people are like, oh my gosh, like I never would have thought about it that way, or
Hmm.
they're like that your perspective from both sides is like invaluable, and I'm like, really? Because I just thought that like this is what everybody knew about this. But I don't think it is. I mean, I first of all, like I just don't think we have thought about certain aspects of this crime this way because we always thought about it as we were arresting the victims for a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like I said, I think we're catching up, but I think that we still have a long way to go. But I think people have been very receptive, and I feel very flattered and honored that high ranking people in their organizations, directors and owners of companies are like, they're like resharing my stuff on LinkedIn. They are, you know, talking to their people about it, thanking me about talking about these things. And I'm like, absolutely, like, it just gives me so much motivation to go forward, because I'm like, people, they know, I know, other people know that people need to know this stuff. And sometimes I know that this is just not stuff people want to talk about or hear about.
No, that's not. Yeah.
I think professionals do to an extent. I think they do, because I think that we're struggling. It's happening. Like, trafficking's happening, domestic violence, sex assault, it's happening. We can choose to ignore it, but it's happening, and it's causing problems, and it's starting to trickle into our kids, and it's trickling into our families, and it's not well, that just happens to somebody else. Well, that happens somewhere else. It's not that anymore. And I'm glad we're bringing awareness to it. And I'm glad that we're talking about it more, because people need to understand there's real threats, and it's really scary, and it's very dangerous. And obviously, like, if it can happen to me, like, I arrest people that do this kinds of thing, and I fell into the same kind of relationship. It's happening. It can happen to your sister and to your brother, to your cousin, it can happen to your mom. Like, it can happen. So we can choose to ignore it. I think people sometimes are like, ugh, you're talking about that again, and it's uncomfortable. But we have to talk about it.
It's time to make everybody uncomfortable. I actually had a guest on who she told the story of how her mother was killed. She was 15 years old at the time, and she was in the house. And she said she was a little reluctant to come on the podcast because she was going to be telling this story. And this happened years and years and years ago. But she was reluctant to come on because she was worried about what her family or friends of her mom would think and how it would hurt them to hear what she had to say. And I think it needs to make people uncomfortable. We need to make people uncomfortable, because if everybody's comfortable with it, no changes can be made.
And it just protects the abusers, right?
That's right.
I mean, really, like, if it's funny, you think about it, like, if it's accepted, or maybe not accepted, but like people just don't care to talk about it in society, then like these people can like run rampant. Like, nobody's stopping them.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about it. And to be honest, like, I want people to be afraid. I want abusers and traffickers and these people to be afraid of people talking about it, because they shouldn't be doing it. So I'm fine with it. I will be a voice to speak up about it. And I mean, my job is to help people and protect people and serve the community and put bad guys in jail and stop these crimes from happening. And like, yeah, so like, I hope they're scared, because people don't deserve to be treated that way. They don't deserve to be exploited, and we should not be protecting people. I feel the same way sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, man, I get nervous that my law enforcement community will look at me and go like, ugh, like, you're so dumb. Like, how did you even end up in these relationships, and blah, blah, all of those things. But you know what? If like that's what law enforcement is saying about me, that is the problem.
Right.
Like, that is the problem that I'm trying to fix.
Yes.
We should not be bad mouthing victims. We should be helping victims, and we should be doing better at our jobs. And you know what? Like, it's not this like, it's so easy to be a cop. You don't even have to have brains to do our job. Like, you have to be very smart to be a cop. You have to be experts in human behavior. And we need to just like step up and get there. And so if people are going to badmouth me in law enforcement, I mean, that's literally the whole reason why I'm speaking up about it.
Right. All the more reason to keep doing it. So if people wanted to get in touch with you or find out more information, how can they do that?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you just search my name on there. I don't know. Can they see my name on here? Will you put it in the notes?
I'll put it in the notes.
Like Shagena doesn't look like Shagena. It looks like Shagena, and people can't read it and pronounce it correctly. So if you could just put it in the notes, that would be great.
Yes, I will.
And then I do have an Instagram. It's Valkyrie Warrior Movement. And Valkyrie is Valkarie. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn because I love connecting with professionals, and I really want to talk about this with other professionals. I think it's really important. But I really, really want to know, I really, really want survivors to know, and survivors that are professionals, survivors that are not professionals, everybody out there, that like, you're not alone. You don't have to feel shame about the things you survived, because you survived. And listen, like, it happens to the best of us. And you can get through it, and to reach out to people who can help you. And you know what? Like, I understand that you're scared to reach out because there's people who don't treat you the right way. And to just find the people that do, and keep pushing and keep telling and keep talking about it. But I just want people to know that they're not alone. And I know, Ingrid, that there are people in law enforcement that have gone through these things. I know of them. I know them. I know people who've gone through domestic violence in law enforcement, sex assault in law enforcement, and also trafficking in law enforcement. So I wish somebody, when I was a young cop in law enforcement, would have said I had gone through this, because maybe I would have felt comfortable, because, law enforcement are my people. And maybe I would have felt comfortable enough to go to them and say, like, hey, I know I'm a cop and this is really embarrassing, but I went through that too.
Yeah.
And maybe I could have gotten help. It is embarrassing as a cop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you feel shame.
Yes. Shame is definitely, I had a guest who came on and just spoke about shame, because I think that's just a very common thread that all of us feel. So, I mean, you actually, that's a really great closing statement, but do you have any lasting words of encouragement or wisdom that you would like to leave as a strong impression on listeners?
Yeah, like I said, you're not alone. And we really, really need to talk about this. And the people who are hurting other people should be afraid that we're talking about it. And we just can't keep it quiet anymore. And we've just got to understand that most victims do actually take accountability for themselves. And they still don't deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mia, thank you so much for coming on. And I'd love to maybe have you back on another time later this year, just as a check-in to see how things are going.
I would love that. That would be great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you again, Mia, for joining me today. And thank you, warriors, for listening. I've included the links Mia was referring to, as well as her 1 in 3 profile, in the show notes. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1 in 3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1 in 3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.